Oh, we are live again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another chapter of Office Hours with John. My name is John. It is November 22nd, 2020. I've lost track. I think this is the fifth one we're doing every Sunday 9 p.m. here in Singapore, where I'm based. And we'll be here for the next 30 to 45 minutes. We'll see how it goes, kind of play it by ear. What's the point of this session? Really to kind of take questions, talk about some of the hot topics in careers, and really basically take what I do as a career coach on a day-to-day basis and send it out so more people can benefit. So if you're on the live chat today or watching the stream, you can interact with me via the chat, or better yet, if you want to come and join me so we can chat face-to-face, which is always the preferred. Check out the Zoom meeting details in the description below, and then join, and we'll come online and we can have a nice little one-on-one chat, which we've done a few times in the past. So let's just start with how we do every week, just talking about some of the major headlines, career-related headlines in the news. And the interesting thing that I wanted to bring to your attention this week is something that was in the Straits Times, the major newspaper here in Singapore, from Wednesday, from DBS, the Development Bank of Singapore, one of the bigger employers here in Singapore, where they mentioned that they would be experimenting with the concept of job sharing, an option that they plan to introduce as part of their initiative to, I guess, be a little more agile and responsive to the post-COVID world. And COVID has really just probably accelerated a lot of their plans. DBS, like many of the banks around the world, know that, behind the scenes, they're working on, things in AI, machine learning, robotic process and automation, tons of technological change and investments they're making, which are going to fundamentally change their workforces in a significant way. Right? So, given COVID, I think they've just kind of accelerated some of the plans, and so they're now announcing that job sharing will be available. So if you're not aware with what job sharing means, it's basically the concept of taking one job that exists today and splitting it amongst multiple people. So two people perhaps doing that same job. Yeah. So whether that's, divided by half, where someone comes in only in the mornings and then hands over to someone in the afternoon shift, right? Or maybe, alternate days. Many ways to look at how they do that. But basically the role that one person would traditionally do would now be split amongst, two or more individuals. Which, again, has been a concept that's been around. It's not anything new, but really rare to find, especially on this side of the world, here in Asia, where I'm based, right? In the article that was posted on the Straits Times, I think the paper mentioned that in Singapore, only a little bit more than 1% of employers have even thought about or have some sort of job sharing program that exists today. So you can imagine it's a pretty bold move for DBS to announce it, and that's why I wanted to flag it. So again, it's something that I've been aware around for a long time. I think the first time I heard about job sharing was probably maybe a good 15 years ago, right, back in North America, where I'm originally from. But I'd rarely, if at all, heard about it here in Asia. And now we see one of the big employers kind of saying that it'll be available. So from an employee perspective, I think this been great, right? I think part of the employees that this will cater to are probably some of those who are a little bit older, that maybe aren't so keen to do 5 days a week, have multiple interests, or those, again, who have a lot of senior experience, but perhaps, the role is coming to an end, or the bank wants to retain them, but yet can't offer them a full-time type of role. So this is a way to kind of split the duties. Obviously, your salary would be prorated based on the job sharing arrangements. But one thing that was noted in the article is that DBS plans to give all employees on job sharing full benefits and covered by their corporate insurance. So again, some perks on that, right? You don't necessarily get as much on the base salary, but if you get all the benefits, I mean, that could be a big win for people. And again, this doesn't preclude you from potentially sharing and doing multiple roles. I mean, you could have a job share in one role. You could be doing a part-time gig on another role. There's lots of different types of things. And the reason I'm talking about this today, and we'll have to do quite a few more sessions on this, is, one thing that I've been very bullish about for the last several years, something I read about maybe 3-4 years ago, and I've been really talking a lot about, is this concept of portfolio careers. Right? So if you're not familiar with portfolio careers, this is basically the concept of, instead of someone, doing one job at any one time, what if you looked at your career as a portfolio of jobs where you did multiple things at one time? Okay. So this isn't the concept of I've done multiple different jobs in different functions across my career, right? I'm in HR. Before that, I used to be in tech. Before that, I was in finance. I used to be a lawyer. I've done a whole bunch of things, and that's therefore I have a portfolio career. Some people misinterpret as that, but that isn't portfolio careers at all. That's what I would call a generalist background. Someone who's been very versatile and very diverse in terms of their functions and maybe their industries, and kind of like a good consultant in a way, able to problem solve across a wide variety of industries and environments. So portfolio career gets into that. Portfolio careers is talking about having multiple jobs at one time. Just like if you think about investing in a portfolio of stocks, for example, right? You don't invest in different stocks at different times. A portfolio, to balance out the risk, right, and to diversify, means that you invest in multiple securities at one time across different industries, different asset classes, different geographies, etc., and etc. And again, that concept could be something that could be very much applied to careers, right? So today, the most classic portfolio career model is, say, someone has a day job where they're doing, A, B, and C, and then maybe in the evenings they've got like a evening job or a separate gig where they're doing, E, F, G, and then maybe on the weekends they're doing something different, maybe volunteering for a nonprofit or for their church or in the community doing HIJ, right? And now when you bring in all that work experience across their day, evening, weekend, now they're doing a whole bunch of things much more fulfilled to the average, employee. Yeah. But, the day, evening, weekend model to some might feel very, unsustainable. I mean, I already have a very demanding day job, 9 to 6, 9 to 7. You want me to pick up a evening job and then the weekend too? I mean, when am I to rest, right? So instead of that, what if you thought about the model this way, where maybe you had one employer that you work for on Monday, Tuesday, doing X, and then a different employer B, that you work for on Wednesday, Thursday, doing task Y, and then maybe Friday and potentially even Saturday, Sunday, you've got another employer, maybe yourself, right, where you're doing Z, something completely different. I think if you think of your career that way, this concept of having it all, which was made popular by a lady from the United States called Marianne Slaughter, who wrote this article in The Atlantic about saying that it's impossible to have it all, right? Because da-da-da-da-da. Well, again, if you use this model, then I think potentially having it all, whatever that means to you, can be potentially much more achievable, right? Now, again, when I've mentioned this idea in the last few years, especially in Asia, people look at me and go, that's weird, right? And who the hell would allow you to do that? Right? Who would allow you only work for a couple days, all right, Monday, Tuesday, and then allow you to work for other companies Wednesday, Thursday, etc., etc.? And again, it wasn't something that was very, very common, although there are people that I know that have been under these arrangements. COVID, though, has changed things significantly. It's allowed people to experiment with this. And in a traditional place like Singapore, and if you're not familiar with this country, right, although it looks very shiny when you come and visit, it looks very modern, we've got world-class infrastructure, great high-rises, Marina Bay Sands. Once you dig beneath the surface, you'll find out that we are very conservative as a society, very conservative. So these kind of new age models of disrupting the status quo, right, the status quo of everybody has one job with one employer, right, is hard to really find adopted. But COVID has forced many people to do crazy things, right? And some of these examples over the last 6 to 8 months have made the headlines. And to me, that's just another bullish sign to show me that, hey, even traditional employers on this side of the world are starting to get open to this kind of idea. So let's take one company that's been in the headlines a lot in the last 6 to 8 months, Singapore Airlines. right? Obviously, being in the travel business in this day and age is super dangerous and super challenging, right? So one of the things they did with a lot of their crew after they, grounded most of their flights is that they didn't want necessarily let their crew, fire them, because on the, when eventually the virus would end and they would have to go back in the air, they didn't have the time and the energy and the money to go and recruit a whole set of new crew, train them in the world-class standards that SQ requires, etc., etc. So they allowed their crew to go into different roles in the short term. Right. Now, most of it was volunteers, but some things that they started to do was, volunteer as customer service in the hospitals. So taking the legendary, Singapore Airlines hospitality and customer service they train their staff for, sending those crew to be frontline workers, right, at hospitals to manage the COVID, in transportation, on the trains, as customer service ambassadors, a great complementary role to leverage their skills. And so much so that some of the crew have found that quite fulfilling and want to continue this way. And for SQ, this makes a lot of sense. So although they're starting to ramp up flights a little bit now, they're still well below their capacity. So why wouldn't you allow, right, your crew to fly maybe 10-15% of a full roster and allow them to go work in some of these other places for 80-85% of the other time? Makes total sense, right? So if a traditional airline like Singapore Airlines, right? Yeah, and traditional in terms of the Singaporean sense, a Singapore company, homegrown, world-class standards, if they're willing to allow their employees to have multiple jobs with other people, why can't others? Another headline that came, I think, around the May timeframe came directly from the Singapore government. Another super traditional, at least in terms of mentality and the way they do things, organization. Okay. So the Ministry of Manpower, the ministry that basically takes care of jobs and visas and all that kind of stuff and all the employment laws, they came out in the news and basically were saying to all employers during COVID times that if you have a clause in your employment contract today for your employees that says no moonlighting, aka, you can't work for anybody else except for me, you might want to suggest getting rid of that clause, right? Because if you can't, pay them today and you can't get them working, then let them do something else, right? At least in the short term. So the fact that, the Singapore government came out to say that publicly, to me, again, is another massive sign that, hey, I think maybe we're getting a little ready for this. And I think now with this DBS headline of job sharing being out there and them kind of paving the way and kind of signaling to the market that, hey, we're moving, we're pivoting the way we need to, staff our business. You guys might want to think of the same. I think the wheels are going to be turning very quickly now. And I wouldn't be surprised that come 2021, mid-2021, we start to see a lot more employers starting to experiment with this kind of stuff. Right, so that 1.3% of employers in Singapore currently, having job sharing, I expect that to increase significantly, in the next year, 2 years. Right, so go check that out. And if you're keen to learn more about portfolio careers in general, I actually did a TEDx talk on the concept just last summer. Something I was pretty proud of. I will put the link in the chat. I'm just looking for the thing. Here it is. All right, I'll put the link in the chat. Go check out this. And if you've got thoughts, you've got questions, come back on a future Sunday, and I would love to chit-chat to you about what you think about this concept, whether it's possible, or you think I'm full of crap, and we can talk much more about this kind of stuff. Okay, so portfolio careers, check it out. In the meantime, for those of you on the live stream with me today, hit me up in the chat if you've got questions or comments or just want to, say hello, or better yet, join the conversation with me. Go into the description below there and find the Zoom meeting details and come online. I'd be happy. I would love to see you. It always feels much better talking to someone live than talking to myself. But I'm getting used to it. I mean, that's part of the reason why I started this whole live stream experiment, to kind of get used to this whole talking to myself a little bit more, right? But if you're there watching anyways, come say hello. While questions come or any thoughts come into your mind, again, just hit me up on the live chat. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about this week that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time is this concept of asking questions, right? The ability to ask questions. In my experience, I find that kind of low, to be really honest, especially here in Singapore and broadly across the region. I think part of it is cultural, right? In the Asian culture, we're kind of taught since young not to ask too many questions, right? Because again, we don't want maybe, look stupid by asking questions. At the same time, we don't want to ask a question that might have the other person lose face, a very important Asian concept. So at the end of the day, we end up saying nothing, right? If we're unclear, we don't say anything, we try to figure it out and end up causing a bigger problem. Or when we do have to ask a question, we ask, really crappy types of questions, or at least a style of questions that lead to crappy answers, right? Everybody who works with data knows that, if you've got crappy data coming in, asking crap questions, you're going to get crappy data coming out. So one of the things I want to talk about today is how to ask better questions. Whether it's in an interview, which clearly you're going to need, right? Because at the last 5 minutes of the interview, the tables always get turned, right? It's the signal that the interview's ending. Okay, John, thanks so much for joining us. We've got a couple minutes left. Do you have any questions for us that you want to ask us? All right. Now, when that happens, what do? I mean, look, here's the first thing. If you don't have any questions, you're dead, right? If you go, no, I'm good, actually, I don't have any questions, get out. Because if you don't have any questions, that means you're not interested in me. And if you're not really interested in me, the employer, the one that's looking to buy and hire someone, if you don't have any questions, if you're not interested in me, then why would I be interested in you? And today, especially today, where there's such a huge imbalance between supply of talent and demand for talent today, if you don't show deep interest, it doesn't really matter how good your skills are. Because I guarantee you there's a bunch of other people that have skills probably just as good as you, right? So if the skills and even the experience are fairly similar across a bunch of candidates, what's going to be the thing that separates you? And I've been saying many times over the last few weeks, it's the motivation, it's your interest. And to me, the questions that you ask at the end of the interview, as an interviewer, to me, that shows me, that clearly separates good candidates from great candidates. Right? So now that you have to ask questions, if you weren't, aware of that in the first place, I guess the real challenge now is what's a good question and what's not a good question, right? These questions like, what kind of training is there available to me? What kind of things will I be doing on a day-to-day basis? Hey, what's the corporate culture like at your company? These are horrible crap questions, okay? And again, before you jump on me and go, what's wrong with those questions? Isn't that important information to have? I mean, yes, the answers to those questions are definitely important. But the point is, if you're asking them in an interview, you're really exposing yourself, if you ask me. You're basically telling me that you haven't done your homework before you arrived, because the answers to those questions are something you should have found out way before you showed up in the room to have this, one-on-one formal interview, right? And the reason they're crap questions is because great candidates already know the answers to those things and would never ask them in the interview. Asking me about the corporate culture in the interview is just like a kiss of death. You should have just told me that you haven't even visited our website. You just pressed a random apply button on some, job portal, right? You don't know anything about us. And again, even if your skills and experiences are at the top tier, if you're not interested in us, I'm not going to be interested in you. So I guess the first big thing to understand when it comes to asking questions, especially in an interview, right? But I would say you could apply this in any scenario, whether it's in a coffee chat where you're chatting with people, with your friends, or anywhere in class. I would suggest you stay away from asking selfish questions. Let's start with that, right? If only you care about the answer to this, it's not a good question in an interview, in a conversation with somebody, because it just shows how selfish you are and makes the conversation so one-sided, all about you. And in an interview, it's definitely not about you. It's always about me, right? The interviewer, the buyer, not you, the interviewee, the seller, right? So stay away from selfish questions. That would be my first big tip. Outside of that, though, I guess I have 3 guiding principles I usually share when it comes to asking good questions, right? Again, I don't like to give rules, right? Because rules means you have to follow them always. But I think guiding principles allows you to have some guidance so that you can create and iterate and come up with a whole bunch of different things, right? The guiding principles don't necessarily box you into a little corner, but does give you a little frame to work with. So I guess the first guiding principle to share is if you don't care about the answer to the question, don't ask. That's probably the first thing I would suggest, right? In any scenario, if you're just trying to ask a question to impress somebody, right? Or someone plants a question in your ear, they tell you, oh yeah, ask these guys this question because they'll be really impressed if you ask them about this. If you don't actually care about the answer, you're just trying to do it to kiss my butt, don't do it. Don't ask. Because here's the thing, we can tell. As interviewers, or even when you're having a conversation with someone, you can tell when someone's just buttering you up, asking you a question just to kiss your butt, and they don't really care about the answer, right? And part of that is once they start giving the answer, you're not even really engaged. You're thinking about the next question, thinking about what you're going to do. You're not really showing me that you really want to, talk, right? Yeah? So don't ask. If I were to give you a specific example of one of these questions today that's quite common, right? Jumping on the bandwagon today, some people like to tell job candidates to ask employers. CSR. CSR is one of those big things, right? Corporate social responsibility. People say, oh, ask them about their CSR initiatives because it shows to the employer that you don't just care about profit, about greed. You care about society, about the environment, about your fellow, human beings, right? Whatever it may be, in the CSR portfolio that you care about. Ask them about that, yeah? But ladies and gentlemen, every time I hear, like, hey, what kind of CSR do you guys do? I kind of want to throw up a little bit, right? Because again, you're not the first person to ask me. You're not the first smart person to try to kiss my butt to score some points. And most of the time, I'm just really skeptical. Do you really care about CSR? Really? Yeah? Now, again, don't get me wrong. It's not that CSR isn't important, okay? It's just asking the question that way. Like, what kind of CSR initiative do you? I think is a crap question, especially if you don't care. Okay? Now, if you care, I'll come back a little bit later and tell you how you can change the style of the question, right? But the first guiding principle is if you don't care, don't ask. Okay? We can tell. The second guiding principle I have, right? All good things come in threes. Yeah. So, second guiding principle, and this is probably going to come be a little different than conventional wisdom that you might have heard of, right? And so give me a little bit of time to explain this to you. But the second big thing that I'm not a fan of is I don't like it when you ask very open-ended questions. So my guiding principle would be like, don't ask open-ended questions. Specific questions are generally better, right? And why are open-ended questions bad? Because for me, when you ask me an open-ended question, it makes me have to do more work, right? Because now the question is so wide open and I don't know where to go with this. So now I have to think about it harder and go, okay, well, what part of this question should I be addressing? Because again, I don't have half an hour to answer this, right? This is the end of interview. We got a couple minutes, so I got to keep my answers kind of short and concise. So like, what part should I go into, right? What part are you interested in? Yeah. And again, in an interview scenario, you want to make the process as painless as possible for the interviewer, right? Now, again, I appreciate that most of the time in the interview that you are doing all the work. As the candidate, as the interviewee, you're the one getting grilled. You're the one that have come up with all these stories, right? So you might say, but John, in the last 5 minutes when the tables turn, you tell me you can't do a little bit of work? I can't ask you some questions that force you to think a little bit? Well, look, first of all, here's something important that you need to know. If you haven't done a lot of interviewing, right, and I've done a ton in my career, yeah, in those 20-25 minutes where I'm asking the questions and you're doing the talking, I know you think you're doing most of the work, but let me tell you, I'm doing a lot of work too. Because for most of it, I've got to sit there and look like I care about your answers, even when your stories are kind of crap, cliche, and I've heard them a million times, or I don't even know what the hell you're talking to me about, right? That's a lot of work for me, FYI, yeah? I don't know if you remember, but have you ever been in a conversation with someone where they're just talking about stuff and you don't really care, but you don't want to be rude, so you kind of have to like nod along and fake it and try to show interest? Do you know how, energy zapping that is? Think about sitting in your prof's class if you're at school and listen to that prof drone on and on, but you're in the front row, so you can't fall asleep, you can't lie down on your desk, right? That takes a lot of energy. So I know it feels like you're doing a lot of work, but trust me, I'm doing a lot of work too. So the last 5 minutes, right, when the tables are turned, don't go all, crazy and start firing away and make me do a lot of work. Make it easy on me. I will like you more. And that's super important. Likability, right? Because I'm a human being, we have flaws when it comes to selection, and likability is one of those things, right? And that's why I think specific questions are a lot easier to tackle for the person being asked versus open-ended questions. So let me give you a great classic example of an open-ended question I used to get asked a lot. So what's the favorite thing you love about your job, John? What gets you out of bed every day and motivated to go to work? And I'm like, really? This one again, right? First of all, do you even care about the answer to this? Or are you just trying to kiss my butt, trying to make me feel good, right? That's skeptical thought number one in my head, right? But, problem number two is like, what part of my job do you want me to talk about? Right? Obviously I like my job, otherwise they wouldn't let me interview you, because as an interviewer, I'm a bit of an ambassador to the company, right? So if I hated my job, I was really disgruntled, do you think they'd let me interview other candidates, right? Yeah. So I want to answer this, but again, there's so many different things. Are we talking about the day-to-day tasks that I have to do, the intellectual challenge of the problems that I'm solving? Are you asking me about my coworkers and whether we get along, or the location, or the perks of the job, the travel, my bosses, the pay? What part about the job? There's so many different things I could talk about. So when you say, hey, what's the favorite thing? I'm kind of like, and why do you care about my favorite thing? What's that got to do with you, right? It just feels like you're just trying to kiss my butt. Not a good question. If there's something specific you care about, then ask me about that, right? Hey, John, one thing that's really important to me, I'm very interested in this part of the job. Can you tell me a little bit more experiences when it comes to this, right? Okay, I can answer you, right? My brain can go right there and I can answer the question. Now, I still don't love that question because it sounds like it's going to be very selfish, right? Something only you care about and I probably don't care about, so generally not a good question. But at least it doesn't make me do a lot of work. So, guiding principle number 2, don't ask open-ended questions, try to ask specific questions. Okay. And the last guiding principle, number 3. And this one, I think if you follow this one all the time, 1 and 2 automatically follow. And this is probably the most important thing that you need to realize. Asking questions in any format, not just an interview, whether it's a coffee chat, in class, with friends, if you're at a conference. Yeah. Always set the question up. That's the key, right? That's the key. Good questions always start with a little setup, a little preamble. Maybe, a couple of phrases, 5-10 seconds, a little setup, a little build up. Then the question comes. When you don't have a setup, a preamble, and you just launch into the question directly, do you know what that feels like? That feels like an interrogation, right? Yeah. Hey, what do you think about this? Tell me about that. What are you doing for here, right? Or like a journalist trying to interview me for some, article they're writing. It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel casual. It doesn't feel like we're building a bond. And in an interview specifically, the best style of interviewing and the best environment you're trying to create is a very casual one where it feels like two people just having a chit chat outside at a coffee chat back and forth. Not some sort of formal thing where we're sitting in a meeting room, being interrogated, dressed up in suits, sitting up really straight and stiff, right? Question 1, answer 1. Question 2, answer 2, right? If that's the kind of style of interviewing you're having, you're probably not doing quite well. Now, I'll appreciate that if you're younger, especially if you're an undergraduate just trying to get into the workforce for the first time, that, again, you might not have a lot of power and you might just follow whatever the interviewer does. And if interviewer's in the interrogation mode, then okay, you might feel a little constrained. And I'm with you. You go with the interviewer. But as you get more and more experienced, it's not necessarily that the interviewers get better, by the way. Interviewers are still a little rough, yeah? But you should get a little more experience, and you should be able to set the stage a little bit more, control the environment a little bit more in the way you talk and the questions that you ask. And potentially not even waiting till the last 5 minutes to ask the questions. You're asking questions a little bit throughout. So again, it feels more like a two-way conversation, like it was a friend, and you were getting together, having not seen each other for a couple months, and catching up over coffee on a weekend. Think about how you talk to your friends today. What's the style of your conversation? All right? Is it like, hey, how's your day? And then here comes the answer. And then, oh, well, what about this part? Have you had your lunch yet? And then like short answers with this in character style, not good conversations, right? So always set it up. And the setup is key. Because if you do the setup, guiding principle number 1 and number 2 kind of follow, right? It shows me that this question that you're asking about, you really care about. So maybe you set up by starting to tell me a little bit of what you know already about the topic. What have you heard? What have you read? What have others, shown you? And then ask me, right? So now, does it sound like you're more into it? And again, with a little bit of context in the setup, the question automatically becomes more specific. It's not just wide open in general. Yeah. Generally, the stuff that you say at the beginning gives me some context, and that way I can come to a more specific answer to your question. And again, less work for me. Okay. So let's give you one example here, right? Let's take that CSR question. Let's say you really are into CSR. It is something really important to you, right? And you want to ask that, but you don't want to ask in a very crappy, hey, so what kind of CSR initiatives do you do? Well, a better style of question would be something like this. John, do you mind if I ask you a little bit about CSR, especially at your firm? I was obviously doing my homework before I showed up, and on the website of your firm, there's a whole section about all the initiatives that you guys are doing, which I found very fascinating. And one of the really, really interesting things I found was this thing that you have. I think you call it Global Impact Day, where everybody around the world in all your offices on one specific day, you all stop your work and you go out into the community for the day to give back. Right? Whether it's cleaning up the beach, going to an old age home, at the food bank, Habitat for Humanity, whatever it may be, you all go around and spend a day in the community, right? And again, you have like over 100,000 employees, so that kind of a commitment I thought was pretty impressive. But I'm just kind of curious, outside of Global Impact Day, if I were to join you guys in the Singapore office, are there like smaller day-to-day CSR initiatives I can get involved with? Because again, this is quite important to me. I'm glad you guys do this one big thing, but I'd be keen to contributing in a much more, frequent or regular basis. Okay, if you ask the question like that, that's a totally different style with a totally different spirit. Yes, the base question is still the same. What do you do about CSR? But when you ask it like that, with that kind of setup, right? Does it sound like you're interested in this? Do you care about this? Well, again, to me, is if you didn't care about CSR, you would not have done this homework, right? So the fact that you've just even done the homework and re-quoted that already at least gives me maybe an incorrect feeling, but it gives me a feeling that you care. Okay, this is important to you, done your homework, good. Give you a little extra point for that, right? And again, is it wide open? You're not asking me to talk about CSR in general. You're asking me to talk about CSR specifically here in the Singapore office in a smaller day-to-day, right, perspective. So right away, my mind can go to the stuff that's happening today and give you something, right? And with this type of style, it just feels more conversational, not back and forth. So when it comes to asking questions, again, a quick recap. No selfish questions. Let's start with the golden rule. Questions that only you care about, generally not great, because it doesn't connect with the other person. And again, in an interview specifically, you want to be connecting with the interviewer all the time at whatever levels you can get. Not just a professional level, social, interests, hobbies, whatever you can. At any level you can get at, because the more, the better. They are a human, and the way they think has biases, right? And you want those biases to work in your favor and not against you. Okay? So, no selfish questions. And then the 3 guiding principles. Number 1, if you don't care, don't ask. Number two, ask open-ended. Don't ask open-ended questions. Ask specific questions. Less work for the interviewer. And number three, the real key one: always set it up before you ask your questions. Always give a little bit of a setup prior, a little preamble, little context. It's a great way also to show off all the homework you've been doing, all that genuine interest you have for this firm, the things that you've read, heard, the people you've spoken to, the events you attended of theirs, the videos you might have seen on their website, on their LinkedIn, whatever homework, right? There's not necessarily a lot of chance for you to show that off in an interview, but the questions are a key part of that kind of stuff. So always set it up. Okay? All right. So I don't know what you think about that. Again, if you're just joining the live stream, send me a note in the live chat. Let me know what you think about this. If you need clarifications, if you disagree, again, I'm happy to have a discussion about this. Some of what I said may be, again, I know, contrary to common practices that people would suggest. All right, but I think the key is to understand why I'm saying these things to you. And all my advice is always backed up with a lot of whys, so that then you can make your own choices. You're fully armed with the approaches that I'm mentioning. And again, it's not that I'm asking you to follow what I'm saying all the time. Right? Every situation may be different. But when you're in your situation and doing the contextual analysis and trying to understand, okay, is this an employer that thinks like John, or is this someone that's maybe very different to John, therefore I probably shouldn't rock the boat, I should do something more traditional? You should be making that judgment. You should never be following any advice blindly, right? So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, hit me up, right? Better yet, come join me online here in Zoom. Check out the description in the YouTube box below, and hit me up. Usually at this point, people say, okay, what are good questions then, John? You told me a lot of what questions I shouldn't ask, but what's a good question that I should ask, right? And this is usually when I hesitate big time, right? And I'm going to hesitate again today. Because the problem is if I, share a really good question, right, in my experience, you're just going to go and ask that question. And if everybody who's going to be watching this stream, whether it's now or later on the replays, right, if they all love what I'm saying and all ask that same example question, then eventually, interview's going to be like, what's going on? Why is everybody asking me the same damn question all the time? And it's going to stop working. And let me tell you, Singapore is a small, small place. So it's not like I'm streaming to 500,000 people right now, But again, word gets around really quick, and the world is small too, right? So I'm not going to give you any good examples. But again, I think I've given you a lot for you to work towards. If I give you any extra tip on a good one versus what not to ask, look, I think, just follow the spirit. If you believe that the key to being hired is not only to talk about you, your skills, your achievements, but to connect with the other, individual, the hiring manager, the interviewer, you're trying to connect with them. Well, again, the key is to ask them questions that you think they are going to be interested in, that they are going to want to talk about. So what is this person or these group of people into right now? What are the things that they would be thinking about? And could you ask them something about that, right? So starting from the professional perspective, what's going on in their world? Maybe not just necessarily day-to-day tasks and things related to this specific job, but what's going on in a bigger picture? What's going on in their function? What's going on in their industry? What's going on in their part of the world here that might be keeping them, awake at night, right? Or getting them really excited because there's some cool transformations coming on, right? So if you think about it like that, then there got to be tons of things that you can ask about. And I'm assuming, again, you're asking these things not just to kiss their butt. It's because you were also interested. Remember, that's guiding principle number one. If you're just asking a question because you know they're going to be interested in it, but you don't really care about the answer, again, I can tell. I can tell when you ask me that you're just being smart, trying to kiss my butt and impress me. You're not really trying to build a connection. So I would generally say, don't do it, right? But if this is a job that you really want, in the style that you ask it, people should be able to easily tell that, okay, you're really curious, you're interested in what we do. Hey, this is an interesting question. I've been thinking about it too, and we can have a chit-chat about that kind of stuff. And how do you know if you've asked a good one? What are some of the signs? Well, again, just think about when you're having a conversation with a friend, right? What are the signs that you're asking good questions? What are you looking for from them? Well, I mean, let's start with the basics. Let's start with the nonverbal communication. Again, are they maintaining eye contact? Are they getting a little more animated, right? Is their voice going a little faster, maybe a little bit louder, right? Are they shaking their head with you as you're asking the questions? And how much do they say? Let's think about the content. I mean, if they give you like short, like 5-second answers, like one-liners, well, then clearly it's probably not a great question. Or if they're a little hesitant or they're not sure what to say, again, potentially not a great question. So these cues that you probably are already very in tune with when it comes to social conversations, social interactions with friends and family, right? You can apply those same, habits in a professional setting. It's no different, right? At the end of the day, it's human beings. So it's going to take you a while to find the right rhythm. But look, here's the way I'd like to think about it. If this job is really something you're really into, this is a company that you are very, really excited about, right? Yeah. I think there should be tons of things. So think about maybe, I always like to use the popular culture. So let's think about, your favorite TV show or your favorite movie, right? So one of my favorite TV shows, unfortunately it's no longer on the air, is this show called Suits, right? It's about lawyers, right, in the fast-moving corporate world. And part of the reason I like it, not a huge reason, but a cool reason, is it's shot in my hometown of Toronto, right? Yeah. But the characters are so rich there. Harvey Specter and Mike Ross and Louis Litt. Oh, man. Great show. Highly recommended. Suits. So, the way I want you to think about it is, let's say I had a chance to sit down with one of the main actors, whether it's, Harvey Specter or Louis Litt. I had a chance to now sit down with someone from the show, one of the main characters, and I'm such a fan. What kind of questions would I ask these guys? Because I've always wanted to know how this is doing, what they're doing, because I'm just a fan, right? What would I ask them? That's the same spirit you should think about for your interviews. Right now in front of you is someone that's an insider in the company, right, in the industry, in potentially the role that you're keen on doing. And maybe you don't have a lot of experience. So there's got to be tons of things you've always curious and wanted to know. And now that you have the insider in front of you, can you come up with some questions and get excited like you're such a fanboy, right? And fire away like that. And I think if you think about it like that, you can ask questions that will really connect with people, and people will be impressed. Because again, people do a lot of prep in interviews for the beginning. Tell me about yourself. Why do you want to work for us? Why this company? Why this job? And they practice their stories, because most of the questions we're going to ask in a behavioral interview are not, it's not a secret, right? Teamwork, initiative, resilience, conflict. All the questions are on the internet. So people come in fairly well rehearsed. But at the end, in the last 5 minutes, when I go, hey, so do you have any questions for me? This is usually when people drop the ball huge. And it's a real chance for you really to show the difference. The good candidates from the great candidates. Okay? The other problem, too, is I find that there's not a lot of people out there that are good at asking questions. And if you're influenced by what others do and you're looking around at people, whether it's in your workplace, at your institution of study, in your own social circle, most people ask pretty crap questions in a corporate world, right? And so end up people just following that. So let me give you a great example. This week, there were some big conferences. One big one in Singapore in the tech world was something called, I can't remember the name, SG Tech or something like that. It was organized by the Singapore government, basically talking about technology and where tech's going in both the private sector and the public sector and in this part of the world. The Prime Minister of Singapore was one of the keynote speakers that opened it up on Monday. It was a virtual conference spread across multiple days. But I think there was a question to him from another senior person, the CEO of, I think, the Singapore Business Federation. Don't know who the gentleman is, right? But that's what I saw. And he had a chance to ask a question. And basically the question he asked, Prime Minister Lee, was something like, because he represents a lot of small and medium businesses, the Singapore Business Federation. He just basically asked PM Lee, so PM Lee, what kind of advice would you give to small business owners right now? I was just thinking, holy crap, how many people get a chance to ask the Prime Minister question? You get the chance now, and that's the question you're going to ask? That crap question? Right? Like that? What kind of advice would you give a small, medium enterprise right now? I'm like, what a shit question. Can I say that? Am I going to get censored on YouTube for some profanity? I don't know. Yeah? I'm like, I was just so disappointed. And you could tell by the answer. I read the transcript of the answer. And, Prime Minister Lee started with saying, well, look, I'm hesitating for a second because, I've never been a business guy, right? I'm not a commercial guy. I've been in, public service my whole life. But, and then he offered a couple of words, right? But at the end of the day, why'd you ask him this? It's so wide open, right? He can say anything he wants, and it probably doesn't even give your membership anything useful. Because all PM Lee's going to do, because he's smart and he's been around, right? He's just going to talk about the agenda that he has, which he's probably already mentioned many times before. So you just gave him a softball question, basically teed it up, laid it out, and said, hey, say whatever the hell you want, PM Lee. Yeah? What a waste. What a waste. And again, that's what I find. Yeah. Great questions. They don't necessarily need to be hard-hitting all the time, but great questions can really impress people. And sometimes great questions can be really basic questions that nobody's ever had the, confidence to ask because they don't want to be stupid, right? That can be really good questions. But other times it's just being smart, setting it up, right? Trying to be more specific, not asking these wide open, right? If you could go back in time, or if you could be 18 all over again, what are these questions? What are you trying to do? You think it sounds so smart, but everybody asks these things, and they actually sound stupid, and they never give an answer that's interesting to you, right? It lets the speaker say whatever they want, and maybe makes the speaker look good, but for you, the one who's asking, what's the point, right? And that's how I've always felt. We can do so much better at asking good questions everywhere in life, right? And if you can start with just your friends and family, and then with your classmates, in your classes to your professors, or at your office with your group and your colleagues, when you actually need to do it in the interview, in the job interview, when it matters maybe a little bit more to you personally, it'll become a habit. You won't have to go back and watch the stream and go, hey, what were those things he said to do and not to do? What were those guiding principles again? Right? You've been doing it every day. And again, you can score so many points by asking good ones. Okay, with that, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for watching again, right? If you've got any comments or questions, again, hit me up on the chat. Let me know. I'll be doing this every Sunday, 9 p.m. Here, Singapore time. Right? I'm hoping to continue this every week right up until the end of the year. So I think we've got like 4 or 5 more of these things before 2021 rolls around. And I'm hoping it's I'm gonna keep it going, right? And if you find this useful, let me know. Give me some shout outs so I know whether I'm really just literally talking to myself every week or people are benefiting from this. And my plan is to hopefully even continue it, maybe some tweaks in the new year. And again, if you have suggestions on either topics or tweaks in the format, or you don't like the setup that I have today, let me know, right? This is kind of my style. I get really animated. Usually, I like to rant a lot, which I don't always get to do. So I felt like, okay, the live stream can be another chance for me to do that. But again, more importantly, get a chance to interact with all of you a lot more. Okay? So, until next week, you can find all my contact details, again, in the box below, or look for me online. Not hard to find me. I don't hide. And I hope to chat with some of you live. Don't be shy, right? We had a couple of guys do it a couple weeks ago. It was awesome. Would love for you to come on Zoom and chat with me again. Chance for some personal career advice, one-on-one, for free, right? Okay. Until then, see you next week. Cheers.